morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you all today. And it's great to see a packed house despite the early start and the Geneva winter weather. As Tony mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the value of aviation. Now, this is a topic that we have visited in the past. Can I just get a show of hands to start with? How many people in this room are familiar with the VOA work that we've done previously? I know that there's a few of you because I recognise a number of the faces from previous years. So there's a few. Okay, good. There's a lot of people that didn't put up their hand. So that makes me feel good about my first slide today, which is looking at what exactly do we mean by the value of aviation. I think this provides a little bit of context to some of the detail that's going to come in following slides. There's a bit of a simplistic view out there that aviation is just about moving stuff from one place to another, from point A to point B. That stuff can be people, it can be cargo. And of course, our industry does it quickly and we do it safely. But nonetheless, there's that very narrow view of what aviation is exactly. The message that we want to get across to you today is that aviation is so much more than just that. Aviation underpins global economic development, prosperity, and opportunity. It's an industry that is unlike any other. I don't think there's too many people in the room today that will disagree with that view. You can see I've listed a few things on this slide which try to give you a bit of an indication of the breadth that we think about when we consider the value of aviation and how we try and put that together. This by no means is an exhaustive list, but I think it gives you a good sense of where we're coming from today. Aviation is about the virtual bridges in the sky, the global interconnectedness, if you like, that only aviation is able to provide. That's what drives this economic value that we're going to talk about. This slide, I think, captures very neatly the three key numbers taken from this latest piece of research. These numbers relate to 2023. And in 2023, around 86.5 million jobs were supported by aviation worldwide. Aviation contributes $4.1 trillion worth of global economic activity. And just to avoid any confusion, 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. So we're talking about $4,000 billion worth of economic activity that is supported by our industry. When you put all of that together and think about that in the context of global GDP, it accounts for almost 4% of total global economic activity, or GDP. Now, if you think about aviation as a country, aviation would be in the top 20 largest countries if you listed them in order. It would come in at about number 20. To put that into some sort of context, it's a similar size to a country like the Netherlands or Saudi Arabia or Switzerland. It's not an insubstantial contribution that aviation makes to global economic activity and global economic development. For those of you that are familiar with the previous work that we've done on the value of aviation, I need to make one quick point. It's an important point. The methodology that's been used in this analysis for 2023 has evolved since the work that we did before. The last study we did on this was prior to the COVID pandemic. So the analysis here today is more robust, it's more comprehensive, if you like, but that means it's not immediately comparable to the numbers that we produced previously. So anybody familiar with that past work, it's not straightforward to compare the two. So just bear that in mind. As it says on this slide, these numbers are created for 2023. And I think it's worth just taking a quick step back to remember exactly where the industry was in 2023. you can see that we were still recovering from the pandemic. The pandemic was well behind us, but industry activity hadn't gotten to those pre-pandemic levels throughout the course of 2023. And that's an important factor because it goes to the magnitude of some of the numbers that you're seeing. So for example, if we were to redo the numbers for this year, for 2024, obviously we haven't got those numbers yet, but if we were to redo them, given the trajectory that you see here, the fact that aviation has continued to move forward, we would expect those jobs and GDP numbers for 2024 to be higher than what I've told you for 2023. So just bear that in mind, that broad circumstance of the industry's recovery it is an important factor in how we think about and how we interpret those numbers for 2023. Now, there are a couple of different ways that we can look at these numbers. We can slice and dice them, thinking about how we got to these global totals. And on this slide, we're showing the total number of jobs in green on the left-hand side, the 86.5 million. In blue, we're showing the total amount of value-added contribution, so the contribution to GDP in blue. On the far right, you can see the four categories which build up to those global totals. They're not immediately intuitive, so let me very quickly just run through what each of those four categories are. The aviation direct segment is what we think of as really the core aviation supply chain, I guess. So that includes airlines, it includes airports, it includes all of the people engaged working at the airports, it includes ANSPs, the air navigation service providers, and it also includes the manufacturers, engine manufacturers, airframe manufacturers, parts manufacturers. All of that is captured in the aviation direct segment. And you can see here the contribution that makes, around 11.6 million jobs and $1.1 trillion worth of economic activity. The indirect segment there builds on the direct component. Those direct businesses, the core aviation supply chain, go and purchase goods and services from other parts of the economy. That creates jobs and it creates economic activity more broadly across the economy. And you can see another substantial contribution there. More than 20 million jobs and around $1.2 trillion worth of economic activity. The third category is induced. And the induced activity, again, comes back from that core aviation direct component. Those people that are employed in the aviation direct segment get paid a wage. And they use that wage to fund their lifestyle, in effect. So they're going out, they're taking that salary that's earned in their job and spreading that throughout the economy as well. That's the induced impact. And again, 17.2 million jobs and more than $900 billion worth of economic activity. The final component here is a little bit tricky. This one's a little bit different to those first three components because we know that around 58% of total international tourists arrive to their destination by air. All of those tourists, once again, spend money on goods and services while they're travelling. That creates jobs, it creates economic activity. Again, that's a broader, a wider impact on the economy that is enabled by the aviation sector. And so we incorporate that in aviation's value as well. 37.3 million jobs there and almost $970 billion worth of economic activity. You sum those figures up, you get the global totals. There is, of course, another way to cut these data, and that's by region. So once again, before we get to those regional numbers, let's take a look at where we were exactly in 2023 at the regional level. Now this chart's a little bit messy. There's a lot of lines here, there's a lot going on. What's interesting here is although the industry total didn't get back to its pre-COVID levels in 2023, some of the regions did. And you can see there are 3 regions that by the end of 2023 are up above that horizontal axis line. I guess the standout on this chart is the pink line, the Asia Pacific, and the gap between Asia Pacific and those other regions. I think we all understand the reasons why there was a lagged recovery that we saw in Asia Pacific. But you can see it very clearly here. That gap has continued to close, of course, through 2024. That's good news, but you can see the impact here in 2023. And once again, these recovery profiles are reflected in the regional splits that we have. Now, the chart that I just showed you, which has jobs and GDP split by the 4 different components, we can do that at the regional level as well. If we do that, we get something that looks like this, which is a horrible, horrible slide to put up for you. Now, let me explain this. I've included it in the deck because the publication is over 100 pages long, so to save you looking through that publication to find these numbers, because I know that there's a lot of interest in these regional splits, it's all here on the slide. I'm not actually going to talk to this. I've got a better way, I think, of showing you this information. But because we're going to share these slides with you, I've put it all together for you here. So don't worry about this one. It's for your ongoing reference. Let me try and show things a slightly different way. The key takeaway here is when we look at jobs and GDP, they're not distributed equally across regions. And there are plenty of region-specific factors and industry-specific factors within the regions and within countries that go to explaining these numbers. You'll recall that on slide 3, we talked about the total number of jobs, the amount of GDP, and then the share of global GDP. We're replicating that same structure here on this slide. The first pie chart on the left-hand side shows you how jobs are split. So we've taken that global total number of jobs, 86.5 million jobs, and we've shown there the regional splits. And almost half of those jobs are located in the Asia Pacific region. Europe is the second largest component there. In the middle, we're looking at the GDP splits. And you can see that the splits for GDP and jobs are quite different. And when we look at jobs, there's a much more even distribution across the 3 key air transport markets in the world. So it's Asia Pacific, it's North America, and it's Europe that take the lion's share of contribution to total GDP. And the final chart on this slide, the chart on the right-hand side, shows the percentage point contribution to get to that 3.9% of total global GDP. And once again, as we saw in that second pie chart, the main contribution comes from Asia Pacific, from Europe, and from North America in building up to that 3.9% of GDP. This is the last slide I have for you today. These publications are available to be downloaded. We've talked about the global and regional data. That can be found in the Aviation Benefits Beyond Borders report. Again, I know that's a publication that a number of you will be familiar with. As I mentioned, it's just over 100 pages long, so it doesn't just have the jobs and GDP numbers. There's a lot more information there that is of interest, covering a wide range of topics. Importantly, and something we haven't spoken about today, are the country level assessments. So we've taken these global jobs and GDP numbers and we've broken them out. And in the last couple of weeks, the team has put together just over 80 individual country reports. So we take the jobs, we take the GDP numbers, we take a whole bunch of other important aviation indicators, including affordability, including connectivity, and we put those together in individual country level reports. Those reports are being uploaded as I speak, so they may not all be there just yet, They will be by the end of the day. We're getting them up as soon as we can, but we think there's a real value, not only to our regional teams, but also to people in this room from those country level reports as well.